have you always known your sexuality, or was it something you kind of had to realise later on?
I think that one's a really interesting one. I think a lot of people say, you're born gay, and I do believe that, but I think I started figuring it out when I was 8. I know it's very specific, but I used to watch Xena, the Warrior Princess, great show, and I remember thinking like, oh, she's really pretty, but probably more so than like my sister who was watching it at the same time and appreciating it for Hercules. And I used to watch that a lot and kind of think about, I don't know, I knew something was like the way I don't know, not the way I felt about it because obviously I didn't know her, but the way I looked at her I knew was different from the way my sister looked at her. And then as I grew up, I had friends, when you kind of hit about 12 and 13 and everyone's like, oh, I'm going to get a boyfriend and, I'm going to go out with Sam who's in year 6 and like it's all scandalous. I never was after that, and I never wanted it for any other reason than the fact that it was what was being done by friends. I didn't find any of the boys attractive, didn't want to have a hand holding, a kiss on the cheek, year 6 disco with them. So I kind of that all happened quite young, but then I think I really kind of just procrastinated really with figuring it out. I kind of just put it off until I was about, like I've always known, but I think I really kind of accepted it and like looked at it and was like, well, we have to deal with this. Like this is now not you getting to a grown up point where you can't just be like, oh, I don't look at boys. I don't look at girls. I don't look at anyone. Oh, what are you talking about? So I kind of got to 8 was when I can put my hand on knowing that I knew what was going on within myself, but to the point of accepting it was a lot later. Like maybe I was 16, 17, when I was okay to be like, all right, that's what's going on.
So how did you come out?
I didn't come out on my own esteem. I came out because the rumours got out before I came out. I had a very close friend who had a slight emotional meltdown, and she was dealing with a lot of stuff. She had like just a truckload of things going on in her personal life, and she had this huge breakdown to me one day, and she was sitting there and she'd been bawling her eyes out, and her and I were just sitting together, and she was just had that kind of like awkward afterglow moment where she was like had been so violently like shaking and crying that she was like almost about to throw up, and then she's just like, I need you to talk, like you need to talk to me about anything, something, like what, just tell me something about you so I don't feel like such a freak right now. And like, so she was really uncomfortable, so she was like effectively wanted me to tell her something uncomfortable so she was alright again. And I think the only thing I could come to grips with was I was starting a relationship with a girl, and like an official one, I guess, for my first girlfriend, and I didn't know about like what to do and how I felt and if I wanted to actually put a label on it or if I wanted to acknowledge it or whether I just wanted to bury it and pretend it didn't exist. So I just blurted out, I was like, I'm gay, I think. No, I'm sure, I'm 100% gay. And then she, bless her cotton socks, told another friend, but in an innocent way. Like I know that she was just like, oh my god, Alyce told me this. And then she told that friend, and that friend and I weren't on good terms at the time, and that was when she called her boyfriend, who told everyone at his school, and then they told everyone at Marici, and then she had already told everyone at St Clair's, and then Eddie's had got a hold, like, and I literally walked out, and it was recess, like by the time everything happened, I walked out at recess and I had a phone full of messages, like none of which were nice, like there were really no great ones. And then I went and found my friend, and I was just like, whoa, like the one who had the breakdown. I was just like, oh, thought we just had a bit of an us moment. Didn't exactly go and talk about your problems, what happened? Then she explained who she told it to, and then I went and talked to that friend, and she wasn't very receptive, kind of just told me where to go shove it, respectively, and that the world should know that, like, who I was and all that kind of stuff, but more in a derogatory term, not in like, hey, great for you, more like, let's use this to beat you up and use it against you as a person. So that's how I came out in the school world, I suppose, and then I kind of it all settled down. Good friends stayed good friends. I had good friends throughout, like Mara Steadies, Mariji, who kind of dealt, I don't know, it wasn't hate crime. I really don't want to make it sound like it was like Bloods and Crips Catholic school rivalry. Like, I just had friends who, within that school, when they heard stuff, were happy to shut that down or stop it and just be like, get over yourselves and that kind of stuff. So that went really well. And then, well, it didn't, but it ended kind of all right. Parents were only after I finished school, because I was very conscious of the concept that they were like, it's just a phase, you don't know what you're doing, that kind of stuff. So I didn't want to have them use school as a chance to detract from what I was going through, because it's a convenient thing to just be like, oh, you've got a lot of hormones because you're hitting puberty and you don't know what's going on, so you think this is what it is, but it's not. So I didn't want to use school as a chance for them to kind of pile it on that wheelbarrow and send it away. So I came out to them with because of my current girlfriend. I've been with her for 4 years now, and she's 25 now, and she, when I met her, was 21, and she was already okay with sexuality, dealt with that only a year prior, but she effectively was like, I'm not going to be sneaking around, I don't want to be a secret, I know who I am, I'm proud of who I am, I don't want to be something you're ashamed of and kind of sneaking in and out of your house. And I was like, okay. And so she's like, if you want me, you'll tell them, which was a bit rough, like as far as a demand to make, but I fancied it a fair bit, obviously, because I'm still here. And so I ended up, my mum was really funny, like she was dropping me at work, and I could see, like, I was psyching myself up for the 15 minutes it would take me to get to work, and I was like, this is the day, I'm going to do it, it's going to be great and brutal, and if I tell her and it goes awful, I can be at work and then I can go to Danny's house, I like my girlfriend, I can go to Dan's house after and it'll be fine, nothing wrong. And so I was trying to tell her the whole time, and I was just like, Mum, I'm gay. Yeah. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't, like, it was like the words just kept getting caught behind my teeth, and I was just like, okay, I just won't say anything. And it wasn't until she was pulling into the car park at my work, and I accidentally yelled it at her because I was psyching myself so much. I'm like, I'm going to be sick. And she's like, what's wrong with you? And so we pulled into the car park, and I literally just screamed at her. I'm like, I'm gay. And then tried to barrel roll out of the car to avoid the conflict that would happen. And she slammed on the brakes, and like I literally did have the door open because I was like ready to jump out. And she slammed on the brakes, and she just screamed out. She was just like, what about Nick? Now, Nick was my best friend at the time, he was beautiful. Like, he is like a unicorn equivalent of a man. Like, he's just majestic and incredibly good looking, doesn't have problem getting ladies, nice to mums, like just one of those people. And Mum was secretly hoping when he was staying over that I was accidentally going to get impregnated. And so she was actually distraught because her plan was for he and I to get married and have 14 kids and dress in Leidenhausen and travel Austria with a band. Like, that was effectively her plan. So it didn't come true, but she yelled out, what about Nick? And then started crying, and I didn't know how to deal with that. So me being me, ran away. I was just like, all right, see you, Mum, bye. And then she's just like, all right, well, I'm not going to tell your dad, you can tell him, but we need to talk about it later. And I was like, oh, it's never good when your mum says it, or any woman says it. So I was like, oh. And then my dad I told, because I'd been spending some time at Danny's house, and he's like, oh, I haven't noticed you around home much. Like, I mean, we all live together, but he's like, oh, I haven't noticed you around home much. Where have you been? And I was like, oh, I've just been at Danny's house. And he's like, so who's Danny? I was like, oh. He's like, I was like, girlfriend. And he's just like, well, knew it, great. All right, glad you got that off your chest. And I was like, oh. So they both took it really well. But long story short, yeah, so they all dealt with it well. My sister was incredibly supportive, but she knew quite early on in the piece. And yeah, I lost some friends because of it, but I also made some amazing friends because of it. Because some people just don't know how to deal with it. Or I don't even know what's wrong with them, but they were just like, oh, creepy. See ya.
They just felt that they couldn't
relate,
yeah.
Like, as I said to you before, like, they just assume that I'm going to attack them in a dark alley, potentially. So, yeah, that was it, but it was a learning curve. It was a good one. Just happy it happened, so I have heard a thing.
Back when you were saying that you were finding it, like you couldn't get the words out to your mum, what do you think was holding you back?
It was something she'd said to me about 6 months prior, and I had, again, I use the term girlfriend really loosely. I don't want to say experiment because I don't want to take away from it, but the first official girlfriend that I was kind of starting to bring home and felt quite serious about, and all that kind of stuff as you do when you're in school. And I brought her home, and she, lovely person, but doesn't know how to deal with parents. Like, so when you come into someone's house, you're like, hi, how are you? You know, talk to the parents, and then go off and, you know, watch TV or whatever. She would kind of just walk straight in and then just go into our room, like my room, not her room, my room, and just wouldn't communicate. Mum and Dad, like, how's your day? No, nothing. So she wasn't a great experience for them because she was just blatantly rude, and I don't think it was anything except being socially retarded. Like, she just didn't, maybe Asperger's or something, just didn't register that that's probably not great. So anyway, I think that they kind of had an inkling around then, but she hadn't done me any favours in that sense that I, like, if that was the kind of people I was bringing home. So Mum said to me one day, she was just like, I'd had a big fight with her because I was like, you know, why do you hate Mrs. X? Literally. Oh, great. I was like, yeah, you know, why do you hate so-and-so? And Mum just went off the deep end, and it was more about the person, not the sexuality, but she had said to me, she was just like, I said, do you hate her because she's gay? And Mum kind of thought about it for a bit, and she was just like, I don't hate her. She's like, no, what did she say? She said, word for word, she was just like, I can't hate her for that, but no parent wants a gay child. And I was just like, oh, right, not the time to tell you then, is it? So I let that go. I was just like, right, I'll bank that in the back pocket and keep it for future reference. And no, it was something, she'd said it like that, and then there was a few other kind of just passing comments that she didn't mean maliciously, but when your foundation within yourself and what you're going through isn't set and stable, it only takes something like that, which is seemingly minor now, to kind of knock it out and make everything like, oh, again. So, especially when it's someone you love so much and care about so much, like, I think that was, so knowing that she dropped a few of those comments, I was like, oh, I don't think you should be knowing what's going on with me right now. So, yeah, but we talked about it not too long ago, like a start of this year about it, and she's like, why didn't you tell me earlier? And I brought up to her the fact that that's what she'd said, and she burst into tears. She was like, that was never my intention. Like, it was because, like, no parent wants a gay child because they don't love them or, you know, accept them for who they are, but it's because they don't want what society can bring to it. And because it's not as openly as accepted as it should be. Mum was more worried about persecution and that kind of carrying that cross, if we want to get weirdly religious, along with everything else that 16, 17 brings.
I know that St. Clair's is a particularly religious school. What were the obstacles that you had in your day-to-day?
Funnily enough, I may be the only captain that went through St. Clair's that was an atheist. I don't have a strong religious foundation, so I didn't find the teachings to be any contradict. Like, I know that there's a lot of gay and lesbian Christians and, you know, Muslims and, you know, that religious people who do struggle with having both of those aspects in their life. I didn't, but I think the fact that the college, the position I was in, you know, as a representative of that in an external sense, but also internally, you are meant to be the epitome of, you know, Catholic light and, you know, all the good things about people embodied in one. And, you know, you're meant to be a representation of, you know, the ethos and, you know, everything that they stood for and what they're willing to project. And so I found my time there, it was hard because I spent a lot of time covering what I was learning to be okay with. I had to, even though internally I was like, all right, I'm starting to get all right with this, I'm starting to realise this is all part of it. Externally and in such a tight-knit, close environment, us having the external being like, oh, it's not great, that's not right, this shouldn't be happening, rah, rah. And so I think that was one thing I really did struggle with, and I had people in teaching positions tell me that, that rumours circulate around schools, and this was after I was outed at school, and I got pulled aside by someone, and they just highlighted the fact that the role that I was in, you are meant to be this beacon of Catholic light. Everything you do is a reflection of what they stand for, and that even though rumours go around, you have to make sure your actions don't become, the whole actions speak louder than words. You don't want to have to jeopardise the position that I'd been put in. It was pretty rough because I loved the school, loved the position, loved the people, loved the teachers, but to have something I was learning to become okay with then effectively quashed by the idea that the school I loved didn't need to see it, didn't want to know about it, it didn't help with where I was already at.
How did you deal with it?
I didn't really deal with it. I didn't deal with much during that time. I think I made a very conscious effort. There's the expression, don't fish off the company wharf. So it's, you don't engage in any social relations with people in your same kind of environment. So, I never dated any friends from Sinclair's. I never pursued anything with any girls from my school because I didn't want that to be a problem. I kept my personal life incredibly personal and behind closed doors, just because of the risks that were associated with if a picture ends up on Facebook or like with today's social media, like it always happens. I didn't want that having photographic evidence that there was this going on in the background or whatever. So I think in a way kind of isolated myself in external social situations. So someone's 18th or something, I'd be like, oh, what? Buy myself with a drink. Where's the cats? Oh, this is Gloria's dog. I'm gonna play with the dog. So I was overly careful to avoid being in situations. So ostracize myself in a great creepy way, just to kind of balance. I don't know. I was trying so hard to avoid it all. I feel I missed out on it. That was how I dealt with it. And then I had friends. I had really great friends. But yeah, I think it was more of I was happy to take that on as a personal thing because I didn't want to be a burden to other mates who were going through similar things and even bigger things. So
it's a horrible experience to be outed.
Yeah.
In any way.
Yeah.
I've always wondered though, because if you had told people and come out in your own time, do you think it would have been as big of a rumour spread as it was?
Yeah.
You still do?
I think the problem though with rumours is traditionally, and I would say like 99% of the time, any rumour that is spread has a malicious intent to it. And I think that was my biggest thing, is that like if I'd come out on my own time, it would have been first to close friends or people that I trusted, and then kind of worked like when I was okay with it and when I was surrounded by people I knew were okay with it. As it kind of spread, if I got the retaliation that I did, then I would at least have them as kind of like a break before it hit me, because if it did hit me, I could be like, oh, well, this is what's going on, and I'm already surrounded by people who are okay with it. Whereas the way that I was outed, and so quickly and efficiently, thanks to modern technology, I think the big thing was that I didn't have time to process it. Like, it's still something I wasn't okay with labeling myself as. Like, I knew what was going on, it was just about chucking a label on it and then getting settled with it within myself to then be confident and happy enough to deal with any retaliation that came. But instead it was just a huge tidal wave of really mean abuse. But it's okay. I think it said a lot about my character, how I dealt with it, just to talk myself up a little bit. No, you just kind of take it on the chin and move on with it and work your way through it as best you can, but it's never great.
Did you have any other strong experiences with homophobia?
Yeah, I had a pretty rough one. About 2 years ago now, I was shopping in Tuggeranong, Hyperdo, and I was holding Danny's hand, and we were walking through the shops, and she kissed me on the cheek. Cheek, not mouth, not, on the floor, going at it, kissed me on the cheek. And this lady who was of the Muslim faith, literally I had a little 3-year-old daughter and a cousin with her, stopped the child, and she tapped me on the shoulder, and she's just like, what the fuck do you think you're doing? You're a fucking animal. And I was just like, beg your pardon. And she's like, you fucking kiss her, you fucking animal, you keep that fucking shit behind closed doors. Like, drop the F word probably more times in a minute than she blinked. It was just a lot. It was just an excessive amount of F. So she started having a go, and she said, my child doesn't need to see your people and the way that you fucking animals decide to act out your life. You can fuck off. I said sorry for some reason. I was kind of caught off guard. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. And then I saw her again, but I was by myself. Like, I'd gone to pay the parking. And she was standing there, and she yelled out across everyone. She was just like, have you got a fucking problem with me, faggot? And usually smart people would have just kind of been like, no, and walked away. But I was a little worked up, a little angry, and I was just like, you know what? Yeah, I do. And then it just spitballed into she came over to me yelling. I wasn't yelling, but I was starting to get really worked up. She had a cousin, her 3-year-old daughter, and she just went off her nut. Like, I have never seen a woman so passionately hate someone in my life. And I was just, like, still, to this day, I'm just like, what happened? Like, who hurt you? What? We're good people. But she went off her tree, and she was explaining how her daughter doesn't need to see this. Her daughter doesn't need to be exposed to the filth that is my people and my culture and all this kind of stuff, and how, you know, as, you know, what kind of world will she grow up in? And I stopped her, and I was actually quite proud of myself, because I managed, despite the rage Hulk thing that I was clearly going under, I just said to her, I was like, you know, what kind of example are you setting for your daughter that, you know, she can come up and it's okay to attack a minority? I was like, you were doing this publicly, you were doing this in front of her, and you are showing her that it is okay to approach someone who is different from you and attack them in a public forum and try and belittle them. What example are you exactly trying to set for her? So then she took that as, you are the worst mother of the year, I'm going to call the docs and have you arrested and probably plant heroin in your house. So it got really offensive. She's like, you think I'm a bad mother? Rah, rah, rah. Like, just then went off her handle, then gave her coffee, to her cousin. She's like, take my coffee, take my child. She's like, you want to go outside and finish this? And then me, being an idiot, used the line, I don't see how me kicking your ass is going to fix this. Now, I'm not a fighter with fists, I'm more of a wordsmith. And she was just like, oh, that's fair. So just went off a tree again, kept bringing it back to about her daughter, and then I said to her, you know, you can't teach her it's okay to attack a minority. Don't attack anyone, but don't attack a minority. And then she's just like, if you want to talk about minority, I am the walking epitome of minority. I am a single mother, I am a Muslim, I am, you know, in Australia, like, living this life by myself and raising my daughter and, you know, in your culture where I am every day. And I was like, then you should understand the struggles that we go through, and you shouldn't teach her that then if anything that she experiences, which she will, because they had the burqas and they were completely covered, she had gone off, and I was like, you know, you are teaching her effectively that if someone comes up, some ignorant asshole comes up and has a go at her about her beliefs or the way that she was raised, that's okay, and she's just got to cop it on the chin, because that's the society we live in. I was like, that's what you're doing. By doing what you're doing to me right now, that's it. And then she went off about comparing her faith to the act of animals, and how that we'll burn in hell for 1,000 lifetimes, and Allah will strike me down. And it's like, well, that's all right. I think, you know, God's got it in for us as well. Like, I'm really not going any great deal of places with any of the religious group. She was really full on. And, you know, she was very, very assertive with her beliefs, how she believed her daughter should be perceived, and, you know, just kept spitballing on it. At the end of it, I was just like, this is going in circles. I was really, really worked up to that awkward point where I was about to cry because I was so angry, but I was like, she's not going to see me cry. And I had, like, tears brimming, and so she'd gone on and on and on. I'd have a few things to say. I wasn't abusive. I was just like, let's think about this logically. And what you're doing is just fucking stupid. And just said to her in the end, I was just like, look, if you, like, you know, for the sake of your daughter, I hope she doesn't turn out as bigoted and twisted as you are. Have a good one. And then walked away. and then went out into the car park and broke down crying because I've never experienced such hatred, such like just unbridled. If there was like a small crowd had emerged and security guards had done nothing, like they were just like at the back having a look. I looked over and Danny was like, "Why aren't you back with my parking ticket?" Like at the back texting on her phone because she didn't want to get involved in the conflict. I was like, "No, I've got it. It's all right. Like if I get stabbed, at least take me to hospital." But no, I just got outside and I just lost it. Like I couldn't, like I was shaking, I could breathe, and it was just, I'd never, ever encountered something that persistently hateful. I know that people have suffered worse, and that's the thing. I'm never conscious, like I never want to be like, that's the worst thing ever. Like it was just being that taken aback by people's ignorance. I think that was just, I was just like, how are you functioning in today's society? Like I don't understand.
Have you experienced any other prejudice?
Besides just living in today's society, which is an indirect kick in my teeth on a daily basis, no individual acts, just the constant background.
What are the constants?
I think I'll never get over the fact that any woman, as soon as she finds out that, I'm a lesbian, it's just like, oh, you are going to mount me in a back room. Like, I can't be by myself. Like, oh, this is my boyfriend. I'm like, that's great. Please don't flatter yourself. Like, well, I think it's just ignorance. So just on a daily basis, like, you read the paper and you hear about these idiots that we're electing into Parliament being like, oh, if gays can get married, next thing they'll be marrying their dogs. Look, I love my dogs more than the next person who walks past me, but am I going to try and get a prenup with my German Shepherd? Probably not. Like, just little things like that, like where it's just this automatic, like, you're gay, so, I'm going to, like, equate you to the fact that you're going to marry your sister, if that's okay. Like, little things like that, like, in I think more a political sense, like, that's the constant to me. The fact we're still debating it, we're still talking about it, we're still using this as like I don't even know, it's like, there's a lot of things said that, in the future, it's going to be weird when we have kids, that they're going to be reading through history books and they're going to be reading about, South Africa and the apartheid and, even back to like Lincoln freeing the slaves and like, all these major events where people were fighting for equality and like women's suffrage and all that stuff. And they're going to be reading about that and then hopefully they'll get a few chapters in and then find out that, once upon a time it was actually, illegal to be gay and, it was illegal to get married and, that kind of stuff. And they're just going to be like, what happened? Why were you so backwards back then? And I think that's just what dumbfounds me, is the fact that I feel that is a constant.
Any prejudice you've encountered in the LGBTQ community in Canberra?
No. I think this has got to be a really careful line, because I think once starts talking about our community, like the lesbian, LGBTQ, all the other acronyms we've got out at the moment, I think the minute we start looking to split them up even further, like we start like, well, intersex don't count because, that's a medical thing, and like, oh, you can't do this, and the lesbians are different from the gays, and it's like, we've all got the same struggle. We've all got the same problem right now. Like, everyone's got their own bad experiences, whether it's family, friends, partners, whatever. Everyone's got, like, we're already all on that same page, and I think the minute people start looking at it and being like, oh, all lesbians hate gay men because they're more effeminate and can wear dresses, well, okay, there we go. The transsexuals and the cross-dressers, any lesbian who's like, I hate cross-dressers because they can pull off a skirt better than I can. I snaps to that. Like, I don't have the legs for half the dresses, any of the dresses that the ladies who don the nightgowns. Like, I couldn't do that. I couldn't look that great. And I think the biggest problem is that people in our community look at, like, when they attack another part of our community. So, like, example, any lesbian who turns around then and looks at someone who cross-dresses and then has a go about what the fuck is she wearing? What does she think? Like, she's not a real girl. Like, that kind of... Anytime you start beating at that, I think that needs to be reflected on the individual, not the group that they're apparently representing, because I can bet you that one individual who hates the dress that, the cross-dresser's currently wearing, there's going to be 40 others who are just like, that's fucking great legs. It's a big thing, I think. I don't deny it's there. I think there's a lot of subgroups. I think there's a lot of, other labels that aren't recognised. But I think at the moment there's too much of a way to split and cut. They're just trying to cut it too many ways. And I don't know if that. I hope that's not perceived as ignorance against, the cisgendered people, pansexuals, that kind of stuff. Like, I think it's just a case of we're already segregated enough from society in its own way. Like, we don't need to add it within our own, birds of a feather stick together, let's just do that. I just feel like hugging everyone and being like, get your shit together, we can do it.
Have your experiences changed the views you had when you were younger?
Not so much. I think one thing I did that I'll always kick myself in the face for, if that was actually physically possible for me, a really, really good friend of mine, she was dealing with her sexuality a lot earlier in the piece. She was year 8, and she was like, yeah, I'm a lesbian. But didn't tell anyone, but I knew. It was just one of those things you're like, come on, you're not fooling anyone. But I really didn't deal with her well. I pushed her, wasn't because I wasn't comfortable with what she was doing. I was just trying to push her out there. And I think it was for my own peace of mind. I was like, if Miranda can do it, I can do it. Sure. So, oh yeah, Miranda, you're lesbian, you giant, filthy dyke. Oh my God, women, oh. So I really pushed her to a point where I only found out recently, 2 years ago, that I had caused her a lot of problems because I was so persistent and so yeah, just get on with it, and so full on, and I had obviously done more damage than good. And she was open with me about it. She was like, you made year 8 hell because I was trying to deal with it and you were trying to push it. I wasn't running around to other people telling it, but to her constantly being I know what I'm like. I would have punched me with a sack of soap. I just really hate that I ever made her feel that bad. But I honestly think I was doing it because I was at the same point, but she was a lot more mature than I was, and she was a lot more ready to deal with it. And so when she was going, I was hoping, I was just yeah, you jump into the water and you tell me if it's really bad, and then I'll decide if I want to get in. I think that's what it was. So that experience I would take back, but I learned from it in the sense that you don't push people. You just do not do it, especially when it's something so personal. I was an asshole. Don't be an asshole. Ever.
How patient are you with explaining to people who are, they're not homophobic, they're open, but, because I know when I came out, I did have to explain it a little to people. They weren't completely rejecting the idea, but they didn't understand.
Yeah.
So I had to explain it. But I lost patience. I began to get a little bit snappy and difficult to be around when it came to that. And I guess I took it a bit personal when they asked me questions.
My biggest problem is ignorance. Definitely ignorance. And I think I don't get frustrated with it though, because I think you should take every time someone comes to you with those questions, you can use it as a chance to educate them and use it as a chance to break any stereotypes they think already exist. I've had people who are like, so why do you hate men? I was like, I don't. I just really love women. And I'll have guys being like, oh, and men in particular, they're like, oh, why don't you get with men? It's just you've never had a really good man. And I'm like, no. And they're like, you don't know if it couldn't work out. You should just give it a shot. And I'm like, do you sleep with men? And they're like, no, why would I? I was like, why do you sleep with women? Why do you like women? And they'll rattle it all off. They'll list personality traits, they'll list physical traits, they'll list weird stuff oh, how she smells behind her ear, weird stuff. That you're like, yeah, creep. But yeah, that's exactly why. I'm like, so if you wouldn't sleep with a man, not downing straight people here, no straight crime. I just think it's I find it's more exciting if you turn the question back on them. Oh, if a straight person's oh, when did you come out? When did you know you were gay? I think there was a campaign that was quite successful recently, and they're like, oh, when did you know you were straight? Yeah. And as soon as that happens, everyone's like, oh, I guess love doing that. Big fan. Big fan. Everyone's like, oh, shit. Great. So no, I like that. So it's not, yeah, it's just ignorance, I think. But I think if you're patient with it, if you find a way to do it that gauge your audience, like if I walk up to Tony Abbott tomorrow, I'm not going to get very far because he's just shut us down. No, that's not okay. But I think if you find a way to engage him and read your audience and find a way to inject your personality, not just your sexuality, into that in an educational forum, then great. Stay patient. Stay patient.
What about when people tell you to keep your identity to yourself? I mean, this is a form of homophobia.
Yeah, for sure.
How does that make you feel, though?
It just literally makes me feel like we have stepped in a fucking time warp and just shot back in the TARDIS like 400 years. Or because I know they're not doing it for my sake. They're not like, oh, let's just not mention it to, you know, Westboro Baptist Church when we have a meeting with them this afternoon that you're gay. Like, they're doing it because they're not comfortable. I'm comfortable, I'm fine. I don't think anything to do with my private life is going to have a direct effect on how we, you know, go about day-to-day business, whether it's, you know, at work, with other people's friends. Like, I think I'm more sad when that happens because I'm like, you have so far to come and you've got to become so much more alright with what's going on. Because I'm already fine. I'm not going to, you know, I can't turn around and be like, I hate your hair colour. Can you only come out when you're blonde? Like, I just feel it equates to that. I'm like, if you can't take the whole package, don't just pick and choose parts of me that work for you at a certain time. Like, it's not, no thanks. I'm not going to just keep Danny or my sexuality in a trunk under my bed, like, until you're ready to be alright with it.
I'm kind of done with my questions. Is there anything you want to say?
I think if there was anything that, I thought about this, if there was anything that I could do over, like if I could go back to my time at Sinclair's and use what little power I had, I kick myself in the teeth every day with the fact that I didn't implement anything that would create a supportive network for kids. At this day and age, I think being a kid and like growing up and everything, like friend fight, social media, the things that happen, like what's going around, kids have enough to deal with. And I think the fact that at school is obviously one of the biggest places they're going to get bullied if they decide to come out. The fact that so many schools don't have a support network. Yeah, they have counsellors, but if they're a counsellor in a Catholic school, I mean, of course they should be objective, but at the same time, like you're being taught in a classroom that it's wrong. Society is telling you every day that it's wrong. Like, it's just, I don't think there is enough places for kids who are starting to figure out their sexuality. There is nowhere near enough places for them to go within a safe environment for them to start working their way out. And that shits me. And if I could have done anything over, it would have been tried to create some form of, I wouldn't have obviously labelled it like a LVG. I would never have labelled it that because the school that I was at wasn't relevant. Like, you wouldn't want to be bringing attention to it for that reason, but I would be trying to get them in a safe space that they could be like, right, this is what's going on, this is where I'm going with it. Is it a phase? I don't know. Somewhere they're not going to feel they're going to get shamed on the way to a bathroom. Maybe. I think that's the big thing. Just education. Fuck. Just needs to be educated. Fix people right now. Use this to fix people. I
will. I promise you.
God, it makes me angry. I'm just so angry. Especially like recently. I was hoping to propose to my girlfriend, who's now, like, it's been 4 years. I was hoping to ask the big question. Like, I've got permission from her dad, I've spoken to my mum and dad, and it's not something to be taken lightly, and I'm just like, I want to marry her, like, but I don't want to marry her in New Zealand. I don't want to marry her in San Francisco. I want to marry her in a country I love, with people that I love around me, and I don't want to have to feel like a second fucking class citizen. I work 2 jobs, I pay a dickload of tax, like I contribute to communities, like there's all these things that I do on a regular basis. And it's like, despite all of that, and like textbook good person, just because the person, and it's not even choosing to love, it's the person I do love. Because of that, I'm now suddenly like, oh, yeah, no, you're not allowed to get married. But my sister, who's met her boyfriend and had been together for like 2 months, is now talking prenups, and she can get married to him tomorrow because that's just she's straight. Well, you know, snaps to that. I hope she doesn't, but you know, it's like it just takes the shit out of it. Like, it's so frustrating because it's like it absolutely invalidates everything that you go through as a couple. Like, I was fucking excited at JB when we went to buy a TV that I got to put her as a de facto. Like, de facto. I was like, oh, got de facto status. Like, what the fuck? Like, if I could be like, oh, this is my wife, Danny, then fuck yeah, awesome. Kids growing up, then they're not going to be like, oh, it's weird. You know, they're not gonna. It's not going to be that. It goes back to educating. They're going to have, like, it's going to be normal, just as interracial, just as like interreligious. There's probably a better word for that. Interreligious couples. I don't know.
Interfaith?
Yeah, interfaith sounds nicer. Awesome. Yeah, no, I'll work it out. Google it and then put it in. I don't know. I just get really worked up. And then recently today, I don't know if you saw, they had, was it yesterday, they're talking about articles where they're going to annul marriages that happened in the ACT.
Yeah.
I was like, you can't do that. Like, but they can, because they're the government. And I think that's the thing. If your government doesn't accept you, what hope do you have of being considered normal?